Good evening from Beirut, a tense and nervous city tonight as the head of Israel's army has told his troops to prepare for a possible ground invasion in Lebanon, saying that their military boots would enter enemy territory. His words come amidst increasingly intense attacks on both sides. World leaders are gathered at the UN in New York. The US President Joe Biden has warned that all-out war here in the Middle East is possible, but said that there is still an opportunity to settle the conflict. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has warned British nationals still here in Lebanon to leave immediately. Well, Israel has hit more than 2,000 Hezbollah targets here in Lebanon over the last few days. Waves of airstrikes hitting rocket launchers, weapons storage sites and other infrastructure. Today, at least 51 people are reported to have been killed here in Lebanon and more than 200 injured. The UN says over 90,000 people have been forced from their homes since Monday. Well, meanwhile, Hezbollah has expanded its attacks, targeting Israeli civilian and military sites. These included, for the first time, an attempted ballistic missile strike on Tel Aviv, intercepted by Israel. Well, tonight we'll bring you the very latest from our senior international correspondent, Lt Gen, who's in the southern Lebanon city of Tyre. We'll also get analysis from our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, who joins us live from Jerusalem. But we begin in northern Israel, and our correspondent, Paul Adams, is there. Paul.
Anna, this was a day in which both sides seemed willing once again to escalate. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is about to take his case to the United Nations, has said that Israel is inflicting blows on Hezbollah that the group could never possibly have imagined. His top general has spoken publicly for the first time about the possibility that Israeli troops may soon be operating on the ground inside southern Lebanon. But the day began with evidence that Hezbollah is far from finished. As dawn broke over Tel Aviv, another escalation. Hezbollah, for the first time, firing a ballistic missile into the heart of Israel. Just one missile easily shot down, but an unmistakable signal of defiance from Hezbollah. Israel also has escalation in mind. The head of the army visiting troops close to the northern border, telling them to get ready to fight inside Lebanon.
We're preparing the process of a manoeuvre, which means that your military boots will enter enemy territory, enter villages that Hezbollah has prepared as large military outposts.
Tanks have been seen moving north and reservists are being called up, but nothing looks imminent. For now, it's mostly a threat. But its purpose is clear: to allow civilians to return to border communities evacuated a year ago. Places like Kiryat Shmona, hit by hundreds of rockets since last October, now mostly empty. The buses are still running, but there's no one on them. This is normally a town of around 24,000 people. Now only about 3,000 remain. Parts of it are completely deserted. Lebanon is just a couple of miles away, and after everything that's happened in the past 12 months, it's going to take an awful lot for people to come back. The army says 800 buildings have been damaged here, many of them family homes. The military ready to do whatever it takes to stop this from happening.
This is going to be a process that Hezbollah is going to have to give up. The only way these people are ever going to come back home is if Hezbollah is nowhere even close where they can shoot at them again.
As we prepare to leave Kiryat Shmona, another reminder of the danger Hezbollah still poses. Israel's air defences are formidable, but the rockets keep coming. And tonight, threats from another direction. Pro-Iranian militias in Iraq claiming a drone attack on the southern port city of Eilat. Without a ceasefire in Gaza, this all looks destined to continue. Paul Adams, BBC News, Northern Israel.
Well, across the border, just a few miles away in Tyre, Israeli strikes have continued today, and Lt Gen is there for us.
Anna, from early morning until late tonight, Israel has continued pounding targets here. About 60 locations have been hit in the course of the day. Now, here in Tyre, we've heard loud explosions and plenty of ambulances. And in the past few moments, just before we came on air, we again heard the rumble of distant blasts. 50 people have been killed today, added to 550 killed on Monday. War is taking hold. In the southern city of Tyre, the war is coming closer. Israel hitting sites it says are linked to Hezbollah. Today we saw strike after strike. Well, there's just been more incoming Israeli fire and there is smoke rising now. We can't tell exactly what has been hit, but that is a residential area with residential blocks. There was some outgoing fire from Hezbollah a few hours ago, and this is now a familiar routine in southern Lebanon. The gathering storm here this week means British nationals have been told to leave Lebanon immediately. Isabella Baker plans to go tomorrow because she doesn't want family and friends back home to worry. But the human rights student is critical of the government.
I 100% think the UK government should be doing a lot more. And of course it has to worry about its citizens, I understand that. But I think there are priorities, and we wouldn't have to leave if it weren't for the fact that Israel is bombing this country.
And tonight these men wonder if they might be next to be bombed. They're the government civil defence team here in Tyre, and they've just had a call telling them to leave their station. An Israeli voice claimed there was a Hezbollah target nearby. The station chief fears a rerun of history and tragedy. My daughter was killed in the war in 2006 in an Israeli airstrike on the station, says Ali Safi Adin. I had brought her there for safety. My wife was badly maimed and is still suffering. I don't want to lose any of my men the same way. They're already struggling to keep up with the airstrikes. Now they say they'll work from the street to save lives. Orla Gearan, BBC News, Tyre.
Well, in just a moment, we'll get more analysis of this developing situation with our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, who's in Jerusalem. But first, our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, is at the United Nations, where James, world leaders are scheduled to meet for an emergency session on Lebanon.
Yeah, that's right, Anna. The fighting in Israel and Lebanon is hanging really heavily over this annual gathering of world leaders. Within the hour, as you say, there's an emergency Security Council session to discuss the crisis. Now, leaders are calling for de-escalation. Diplomats are being optimistic and saying they're hoping that the Israeli talk of a ground incursion is brinkmanship and not an accurate prediction of what will happen. But nonetheless, they are still working hard. They are talking to the Iranians, the president and his ministers, saying, look, put pressure on your proxy Hezbollah to try and just diffuse the tensions. There's also discussions going on, I understand, about some kind of joint statement by key players calling for a ceasefire by both the Israelis and Hezbollah. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, made this call last Thursday. There are signs other countries may be more willing to agree with this. The crucial question is whether the Americans sign up to it, because they are the country that have crucial leverage over Israel. There's also talk that maybe this statement will be linked somehow to the situation in Gaza and talk of a ceasefire there. So it is early days, but diplomatic gears are grinding here in New York to try to prevent a wider regional conflict.
James, thank you. Well, let's head then live to Jerusalem and our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, you have seen and covered war between these two countries before. What chance at this stage is there of a de-escalation?
Well, let's hope it's happened, because the wars that I've seen in Lebanon have been absolutely disastrous for civilians and for the country. At the moment, it seems that Israel is moving towards a ground offensive, barring some kind of really significant diplomatic breakthrough. So before that happens, and there's no time being talked about right now, Israel's emphasis will continue to be air attacks, hitting targets at a really almost unprecedented rate, and of course with many Lebanese and the authorities there say mostly civilians killed, more than 500 on Monday. Now, Israel believes that inflicting this pain will force Hezbollah somehow to stop firing into Israel. That is against all the ideology and history of behavior that they've had. I think at a time like this, their instinct will be to keep on firing as long as they can. So what is likely to happen? Will Israel be able to deliver the safety that it wants to its northern population? I think that's going to be difficult at all while this goes on. And one more thing, if that offensive does start inside Lebanon, it will not be quick and it will not be easy. There are no easy victories in Lebanon. History shows that.